Anna.
So, Melissa, off you go. I think we agreed, didn't we? You're just going to do a little share and talk about your book. And then I love your 3 stages of relapse. And I think people on here will find that really interesting. So,
Oh, okay.
over to you.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit. Well, first, let me just kind of qualify who I am to you guys. I don't know if you've read my book or if you've had a chance to listen to the podcast that Janet did where I guest on. I did share a little bit of my story or testimony there, but that is essentially what my book is that I wrote. It is my attempt to recover out loud and break my anonymity to share hope and healing with others and share that it can be done, that we can recover. And when I started writing the book, before I go into talking a little bit about my story, people kept trying to push me into this how to category. This is how you do it. And I just couldn't do that because although my journey very much began with a 12-step program, it's not exactly where I'm at right now. The 12 steps is very important to me. I do speak to the 12-step groups. I do follow and practice its principles. But as I've grown in my sobriety, in my alcohol-free life, I think you call it, I have come to appreciate that there are many, many different approaches to recovery. And my heart and my soul feels very comfortable with the acceptance that however you choose to get there and whatever works for you, and you may not know what that is unless it's through trial and error, and that's okay. We'll talk about that with my relapse steps. But however you end up doing it, the point is to find the way that works best for you, so you can live a wonderful, healthy life without the substance blocking you from those opportunities. And so if you hear me say things like 12 steps or AA or God, these are things that worked for me, but don't think that I don't understand or believe that what's working in your life is the way or just as important. My book is not really a how-to. It's more of just sharing my experience and my particular path and to show that it can be done with good. I think Janet said it earlier, to do the work. You just have to keep doing the work. And I don't remember his name. It might have been Darren. He said being comfortable with being uncomfortable as we maneuver through that new way of life. So my name is Melissa Gissy Witherspoon, and I am in recovery from drugs and alcohol. I started drinking and using drugs very early on in my teenage years, and it just became my coping mechanism. And as I maneuvered through life and I write about some of my scenarios, that's what I went to. I grew up in a Catholic household, so I was aware of God and a higher power and that sort of thing, but I never had any kind of spiritual connection. I never made that connection. I don't know that I ever really connected with my own self or investigated who I was. I was always just kind of going with the flow, doing the next thing, and that led me into different circumstances, and those choices from those circumstances that I made, which were very unhealthy most of the time, just kind of snowballed into this. What I write about is a rabbit hole that I fell down for 20 years until I hit rock bottom. And my bottom looked like me on my basement floor of unfinished basement, trying to take my own life because I just couldn't do it anymore. I had 20 years of ups, plateaus, back down, and then have to rebuild myself back up. I'm sailing along, and then I bottom out. And I just couldn't imagine going on one more time. Janet, we may have talked about it on the podcast. I had been to a treatment facility, an inpatient where you go away for 30 days. I was there for 52 days, And they said, you have to go home. Like, you have to get back into this, your life. And I didn't want to leave because I wasn't ready. I knew that if I went back home, I would relapse. That was my mindset. So I had already failed before I left the treatment facility. You see, my mind was still in a place of my go-to, which was vodka and primarily vodka and Xanax. They were my best friends. And so as soon as I got home the next day, I was going to an AA meeting and I found myself in the parking lot of a liquor store. And as I'm downing my airplane bottles, you know, the little small bottles of apple flavored vodka, I always joke that I would drink apple flavor, even though it was disgusting, but I swore that it would cover the smell on my breath, but that is not true. That didn't work. So I made a decision right there in that parking lot. I was going to speed up the death process. I was not going to just sit there and waste away and continue to harm other people. You know, look into the eyes of the people that I love and just continue to disappoint them. And I just really couldn't take another breath. So that's what I did. I attempted suicide, and I failed at that. I mean, I have failed at everything that I tried in life, including taking my own life. And so at that moment, I believe that I had a divine intervention, and I write about that in my book. And so um, I went off to a long-term treatment program, which was dual diagnosis recovery, where you focus not just on the alcohol and the 12-step based kind of program. It's where you really dig deep. And somebody said earlier, mindfulness. That was the first I had heard of mindfulness. And as soon as they started talking about it and having us do exercises, I could just feel the weight lifted off of my shoulders. You know, it was hard work and it was awkward. I was wobbly, like when you first get on a bicycle or, you know, you kind of wobble, you don't have it down pat. So it's been, let's see, I celebrated my 9 years of taking my last drink and drug on November 21st. So I have 9 years, and even still to this day, you guys, I have days where I struggle. Not that I have the obsession to drink or to use drugs. Those really have been lifted by some of the tools that I've learned along the way. A lot of that you guys talk about in Tribe Sober. It's why I have my heart feels so connected to you guys. But you know, life on life's terms does not go away because you're not taking the drink anymore or you're not using the drugs anymore. Things still happen. I'm in a challenge. Don't let, because I'm a published author and I'm speaking to you today that I have all my act together. I'm in the middle of a very challenging period, and I call it shifting from into the next phase of my life, you know, pursuing my Sober Now community, and similarly to what Janet and Tribe Sober is doing that here in America. And it's hard, but I don't give up. Every day is a new day. There's that cliche, Janet, we joked about it on our podcast, the one day at a time. And I was like, if one more person tells me one day at a time, you know, progress, not perfection. I just wanted to knock them out, really. I was so sick of it. I was like, what do you mean one day at a time? I have this. But really, that is how I face it head on, just one day at a time. What can I accomplish today? And then when I try something, if it fails, like trying to connect to talk to y'all at a certain time, or my electronics, you know, I don't have a fit and go into victim mentality. I just keep trying the best that I can. And if it doesn't work out, then tomorrow I resort things and figure out what are my goals? What am I going to do for today? I talked about earlier relapse, and Janet wanted me to mention relapse prevention. There are a couple of things that I want to share with you guys that I feel is very important to the reason why my recovery is the longest stint that it's been this far. I've had several attempts at getting sober or not drinking anymore or not using drugs anymore, and they were all very short-lived. And I believe that a few of the key points to the longevity of this journey is a few things. My spiritual connection. I do firmly believe that you have to find a source outside of yourself that is greater than yourself. Mine I relate to as God. My religion and my spirituality is working for me, and this is my path that I've chose. I have very best friends and that are in that are not drinking anymore, that have a whole entire different view on that. They come from an atheist point of view. I have friends that do 12-step programs, but are on the agnostic side. So I don't want, we said this at the beginning, right? I don't want you to think that I'm saying this is the only way, but this is for me what worked. I found something greater than myself to get me out of myself. It started with nature and being outdoors and walking and feeling grass on my feet. When I would go for walks, I would walk barefoot. And I lived in a very city kind of scenario, and people would look at me like, this lady's crazy. And maybe I am, but I could feel connected to the earth. I felt real when I could touch things, when I could smell the fresh air in the mountains, when I could go to the beach. People would be swimming and surfing and doing all kinds of things. I was sitting there on the ocean, rubbing the sand in my leg and feeling the grains of salt. I was connecting to something outside of myself. And that's how I began my path, my journey to where I am in my spiritual world. And I still very much believe in all of that. But the second thing that I think is the most important is my concept of relapse and relapse prevention. And I say this all the time, but if everybody can say one day at a time over and over again, that I can say this over and over again. Relapse is the stigma within the stigma of addiction. So there is a stigma of addiction that nobody wants to talk about it. It is just now that people are coming out and recovering out loud. It was a very hush hush recovery. So there was a lack of awareness about it. And so how could there be any acceptance about it? Because nobody was talking about it. So the movement that we are right in the middle of right now is amazing. There are so many tools, so many resources, and it is becoming very well accepted that addiction is, in fact, a disease. And so, inside of that stigma, there is a stigma called relapse. So we got it opened up now, right? We're going to talk about addiction, but then nobody wants to talk about relapse. But it's possible. It doesn't have to be. There are plenty of people that decide, I'm never taking that drink again. And then they go on with the rest of their lives and they don't drink again. And that is a beautiful thing. I commend you. It's fabulous. I wish all of us had that same path and journey, but that is not the reality. There's a reality that many, many, many of us will attempt and we will fail. And the only way to be successful is to get back up and try again. Now, why do we have to go all the way to the physical relapse of drinking again? I don't believe that we have to. I believe that we relapse at several different levels before we actually get back to the physical drinking. And so it can get kind of deep. If you read the book, my book, I have a chapter devoted to it, and you can research it more online. But essentially, we have triggers that eventually lead us to the physical drinking, right? But if we are aware of what those triggers are at different stages, we can catch ourselves. So I shared with you guys, and it's embarrassing to share, but I want to be real with you so you understand that you're not alone, and that whether you have 20 years sober or you have 2 days sober, we're all in this together. We all have our ups and downs and areas that have room for growth. Okay. So just recently I had a big blow, and somebody had invaded some very personal areas of my life. And this is what I discussed earlier, that I'm walking through a big challenge. And so it was hard, and it knocked me off my feet. I found myself in bed for a day, and I wouldn't allow it to go longer than that, but I was really depressed, and I was getting inside my head, and I couldn't get out of it. And I have a page, Sober Dash Now, and they were, I like to post things and be inspirational. I couldn't even dig deep to, I had to Google what's something inspirational so I could have something to post, because I didn't have it in me, because I'm human and I was hurting. But when that started happening, I started to relapse. So my first stage is emotional relapse. And so when I'm in my emotional relapse, the first thing that I notice is lack of self-care, laying in bed too long, not washing my hair, self-care, not doing things for yourself, not doing prayer or meditation, which are both a day and night thing for me. So those kind of things are triggers that set off alarms for me that go, oh, you're slipping, and I can catch it. And it's not easy. I don't go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go back to being a happy person today, right? But it is definitely an alarm. You have an alarm on your phone. We have alarms everywhere. Why don't we set a mental alarm clock that shows us when we're getting to a place that is dangerous for us and unhealthy? Wake up, check yourself, and then, let's take a look at it. What does this mean? Why am I doing this? And that is that mindfulness that somebody mentioned earlier. And that is where the mindfulness techniques and the ability to be mindful about your actions and your thoughts is really going to come into play and help you in a great way. So then the next phase would be, for me, I see it as mental relapse. So there's an emotional relapse, and those triggers set off certain alarms. And then if I avoid them or ignore them, or I'm not doing a good job at being mindful about them, because I am like the queen of just brushing something under the rug. I'll deal with that later. I'll deal with that later. Then you get into a mental relapse. And then for me, I identify certain things in that stage. Disconnecting, not reaching out to my sober community, not wanting to go to work. And I have a job that I love very much. I work in a church where I'm of service, and that is all about being outside of myself. It's a beautiful, it's a perfect job for me and for my recovery. I'll find myself not wanting to go and be a part of that, not want to be around people. I've had Zoom meetings scheduled, or speaker in person, speaker meetings scheduled, and I've had to talk myself into wanting to go and participate in those. And this is my entire life, sharing hope and healing with others. So when I'm in that place, man, then that's like a big alarm. Like that needs to be one of those alarms on your phone that goes like, wah, wah, like danger zone. So, and then, of course, the way that I look at it, the third stage of relapse would be the physical. And that is when you are back to physically using substance again. And to me, that is the most difficult and most dangerous stage of relapse, because once you start using substances again, the immediate flood and amount of guilt and shame that pours back into you, it doesn't erase all of the hard work that you've done, and it can't take away all of the knowledge that you've gained on your recovery path or your sober free life, but it does mask it with a heavy, think of a weighted blanket, right? Those are really popular right now. It covers you with guilt and shame, and to pull that off of you takes a lot of work to get back up. So that's how I've used that tool, that way of thinking, to kind of catch myself, because I could have very easily relapsed and drank on what I'm walking through right now. The old Melissa, the old way of life, the old way of thinking, could have easily drank on that. You know, um, some people would yell at people or lash out and do things like that. I would drink at situations. Oh yeah, I'll show you. Boo, that's it. I don't do that anymore, because I have a program that I stick to, and the relapse prevention method in my mind has been one of the most successful things for me. And that's why I really enjoy being able to share that with everybody. It's why I thought it to be important piece of my first book. It's a series of books. This is my first one. And I thought I wanted to write a whole entire book about it, but I I couldn't wait. Right when we were getting ready to publish it, I added it in. I was like, I've got to get it out there because I want people that are struggling with relapse to understand that it's perfectly normal in a any lifestyle. Diabetics relapse. You cannot supposed to eat sugar. They do. They relapse, and then everything in their program is affected. Um, let's see, people on workout programs. Um, they relapse. They have a 30-day program. One day they miss working out. They get on their head. It applies to a lot of things in life. It's really a very simple concept to get and to kind of insert in whatever else it is that you guys have come together and figured out that works for you. And then the third thing that I wanted to mention to you that I think has been the most um, effective in helping me have some good time in this recovery, length of recovery, is the unity. And I want to share how important it is to stay connected. What you're doing today on this Zoom and talking to each other and sharing is a beautiful thing. Look at us. I can see you. I see Yvonne, Fran. Oh, I see Mariana, Brad. Hey, hi, Ross. I see my friend Janet. Like we're all here together with the common purpose and sharing our own ideas and inspirations for each other. And it is so important. Does it have to be a constant all day through the day? No, we have lives. We have to get on with our lives and do our things. But a daily check-in or having a safe place, a sober community, a group of people that understand you and that you can feel comfortable saying things to each other. Like I just shared with y'all, I just met y'all and just told y'all that when I'm in a emotional relapse, I don't wash my hair properly. That's gross. But I can do that because I know that y'all understand what I'm talking about, about self-care and the importance of it. And so those are the three things that really I just wanted to kind of highlight, having some kind of connection to something outside of yourself. Um, the idea of a relapse prevention program and what your triggers are and how to manage those and maneuver through them when they rear their ugly heads, and keeping the unity so you are not at this alone. You are not alone. You do not have to do this alone. The togetherness and the community is your source of strength. That's right, Lucy. Big hug. Hug. So
Thank
that's
you.
what I have to
Thank
share
you.
today.
Thank you, Melissa. That was brilliant. I'm just